think there was some questions still from this afternoon.
In one of the morning sessions, I saw that I was looking at my awareness, knowing that I'm aware, and I could see that it could have been more clear. It wasn't that it was dullness, but it was as if I had to clean the glasses of my glasses.
Sure.
And I don't remember if I tried to use Padmasambhava's advice and it didn't work, or I forgot about it, but nothing worked. I tried to soft it me to try a bit, get it together, or nothing helped. It was just unclear. I mean, not it was unclear. I could see that it could be clearer.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, of course, when we're trying, so the question is that resting in awareness, it didn't seem too clear, and I couldn't really make it more clear. So what to do? Well, one thing we don't want to try and do is push, because then you get agitated. So we want to stay completely relaxed and just pay closer and closer attention, And of course, as we're going to see here in the Shamatha chart, these middling and higher levels, particularly of tension, there's more and more subtle levels of dullness and more subtle levels of agitation. And there are levels that we're not even aware of at the moment. So we have to sort of start where we're at and just be patient, and if it's dull, then just try and sharpen without tensing. And it just takes time. It just takes time and practice, and there's no sort of quick remedy for it, I think.
And there's another question connected.
But again, as you said, one approach that Padmasambhava employed was to ask a question, because if you ask a question, you have to pay very close attention. So you could try that, but yeah.
Whenever I see something as a problem in the practice, I start to figure it in words so I can ask and talk about it, and it gets to be a big distraction.
Yeah, so we have to sort of let go of that urge to conceptualize everything. I mean, as I mentioned a number of times, I think as a beginner, we have to, in fact, use a little bit of dialogue to remind us of what to do. But if that keeps going, then, as you said, it really becomes an obstacle. So we have to sort of just let that go, let it go, let it go, let it go. I mean, again, it's just habit. So we're trying to slowly change our habits. So it'll take time.
I think it's similar to the murmuring.
Sure.
When I'm meditating on my nostrils, breathing through the nostrils, and I'm managing to keep still, to keep concentrating on the nostrils. But sometimes I get, instead of murmuring, I get mental images.
Sure. So, same. Yeah, I mean, same, yeah. Yes, I mean, this is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in this evening's session, just this sort of point here.
First, I wanted to thank you, because when I started practicing many years ago, I practiced Zen.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I would ask a question or someone else would ask a question, then the Zen master would just tap on the floor and said, practice. That's it. Like for years and years and years, it was like that, just this and practice. This was the only answer I got.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay.
And I get used to practicing with my eyes open, of course, in front of a white wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I was used to observe, and I'm really grateful to you and the practice, because I feel, in a sense, liberated from something. For many years, I was observing the mind, or being in awareness. It was a field of awareness, and things were just like visitors came. And I think the critical voice inside of me, and also I don't know, maybe my French education, I don't know, I'm not really sure, I was really polite, in a sense that I was like greeting each one of them, and sometimes going on a stroll with each one of them, and even accompanying them to the door and stuff like that. And I think that the compassionate voice inside now, just let it be. This is the voice that I have inside, like that, not like the Beatles song, more like a soft, soothing, allowing voice. And I feel I have, through this practice now, after many years, the opportunity to be liberated from the obligation to really just be with them, stay with them, and I don't even know where the door of the mind is, so I cannot really accompany them even if I want to. But I feel that now I can start practicing again.
Very good.
So, because I have this liberation of...
Very good.
Thank you.
Very happy. Thank you.
You mentioned before that when you practice, when you're agitated, then it's better, it can be a better practice.
It could, well, not about a better practice. I said it's an opportunity to progress.
Right.
Of course, if we're agitated, it's not the ideal state, but...
So that's my question. Sometimes I go into practice with anger,
Mm-hmm.
and my experience is that it really throws me off balance.
Of course it does. So, yeah. So, of course, so the question is, you know, that sometimes I get into the practice with anger and it really throws me off the practice. So, what to do? So, you know, of course, we want to prepare ourselves well at the beginning of the meditation. And so one of the things we optionally did there was that breathing exercise at the beginning of the meditation, and the main purpose for that is to try and let go of things like that agitation, negative state of mind when we come into the practice, to try and release that by focusing on the breath a little bit at the start, and then from that point then trying to set the positive motivation. So that's one thing, of course. And then, of course, if we're having a lot of anger coming up, then maybe that's a good opportunity then to shift the practice from shamatha to either dealing with anger directly or the antidote, something like loving kindness compassion practice, depending on what the anger is about. So otherwise, if you just keep coming into shamatha with anger, then of course that's going to be quite challenging, quite difficult.
Yeah, because if I look in the mind, it's really like not nice like, to look.
Sure.
It's really like,
Sure. So, yeah. So, therefore, I think it's when these strong mental afflictions come and we can't... I mean, of course, ideally then, if we're doing a shamatha, just to observe them and not get caught up. But, you know, in the beginning stages, that's probably going to be difficult. If some strong mental affliction arises, probably we're going to get sucked into it. So, of course, then an option in the shamatha would be to go into the breath and focus on the breath and just let it go, or just resting in the awareness or so forth. But of course, if none of those approaches are really being effective, then we need to maybe shift to a different practice to address the anger in terms of through the vipassana wing or the compassion wing of the practice. So then we move to those practices to work with that first. Otherwise, it's difficult. Okay, let's go to this evening's topic now then. So what I'd like to do is complete this chart here that we started yesterday evening. So this is the 9-stage model. This is sort of the more or less the standard model that you'll see in terms of the stages that we progress through in the shamatha practice. So in this 9-stage model, these are called the 9 mental abidings. That at each stage we are abiding closer and closer and better on the object. So just to recap a few things that we've covered yesterday in the chart. So down the bottom, of course, we had the meditator. In the left hand was the rope of mindfulness to tie the mind to the object. Right hand, the hook of introspection to monitor that mindfulness, to hook the mind back if we become dull or distracted. The elephant is the mind. The fact that it is black is this laxity or dullness. The monkey is discursive conceptual thought in general. The fact that it's black is symbolizing this excitement, the most common form of distraction. And what we saw, of course, there at the first stage of practice, elephant, monkey running wildly ahead of us, meaning that the first stage of practice, what we notice is that our mind is completely out of control. We can barely focus on the object at all, and we're heavily distracted, heavily dull. But if we patiently continue the practice, we'll go around the corner to the second stage. So that first road, of course, was the road of hearing. We hear the instructions to be able to get into the practice. Second road is the road of thinking or contemplating. We're reflecting on the practice a little bit more in terms of the instructions and in terms of more enthusiasm for the practice, and so we can get more into the practice. And at the second stage, we saw elephant, monkey not running so fast anymore, a little bit of white on the tops of their heads. So that was the factor of stability and clarity, a little bit more stability and clarity coming now. And so at the second stage, we can maybe hold the object for maybe a minute or two. But then again, when we're distracted, we tend to be distracted for long periods of time. So even at the second stage, we tend to be more off the object than on the object. But if we keep practicing, we'll go around the corner to the third and fourth stage. And this was the road of mindfulness. So at stage 3 and 4 now, our mindfulness is improving quite a lot. At stage 3, called resetting, mindfulness a lot better. Now we can hold the object maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And if we get distracted, we quickly recognize that and quickly come back to the object. And so that was the elephant with the head turning backwards. And then we saw the rabbit was coming into the picture now. The rabbit was subtle dullness, subtle laxity. So from stage 3 onwards, we need to start to notice this subtle dullness. Otherwise, we'll sort of get stuck a bit. Of course, the rabbit existed in the earlier stages, but we had much more serious problems to attend to at stage 1 and 2. But from stage 3 onwards, now it becomes an issue. So we need to start to pick up that subtle dullness. And particularly then when we get to stage 4, close setting, now we can hold the object the entire session without ever completely losing it. But still, we have a lot of work to do on the quality of our attention. And there was a question coming up earlier about this mumbling, murmuring underneath the breath. That we're focusing on the breath, and there's a lot of other activity that seems to be going on at the same stage. And here in Attention Revolution from Alan Wallace, he uses the analogy of a radio station to talk about that. And so here he's talking in the context of stage 4. He says, as mentioned previously, in the 4th stage of Shamatha practice, you achieve the power of mindfulness, and the practice comes into its own. While your attention is no longer prone to coarse excitation, so coarse excitation is when you're completely distracted, it is still flawed by a medium degree of excitation. When medium excitation occurs, you don't completely lose track of your object of meditation, but involuntary thoughts occupy the center of attention, and the meditative object is displaced to the periphery. To compare this with coarse excitation, let's again take the analogy of tuning into a radio station. Coarse excitation is like losing your chosen station altogether, as your tuner slips either to another station or into mere static. Medium excitation is like drifting slightly toward another station, but not so completely that you can no longer hear your chosen station at all. You still hear it, but it's muffled by extraneous noise. So here, even at 4th stage, even though we don't completely lose the object, it could still be that actually the main part of our focus is on other things, on distractions, and only a little bit are we holding on to the breath or the object, whatever we're focusing on in the corner of the mind. And of course, as we move along these middling stages, now we're improving the quality of our attention, that our meditative object is more in the center of our focus, and these sort of noise and distractions that are not pulling us away completely start to move further and further to the periphery till eventually they disappear. But that, of course, happens at the higher stages. So that was stage 4. Stage 5 and 6, as we saw here briefly yesterday, stage 5 and 6 are now along the road of introspection. So now introspection is really becoming a lot better, meaning we are more and more closely noticing any subtle agitation, subtle dullness. And remember here, the analogy that's often used here is the analogy of a guitar string. So to talk a little bit more about that, again, we'll go to Attention Revolution on page 78. He says the following. And he's talking about stage 5 now. He says, the primary challenge here is to overcome laxity without undermining stability. The way to counteract laxity is to arouse the attention, to take greater interest in the object of meditation. Tibetan contemplatives liken this to stringing a lute. So a lute is sort of an instrument like a guitar. If the strings are too taut, too tight, they may easily break under the strain. But if they are too slack, the instrument is unplayable. Likewise, the task at this point is to determine the proper pitch of attention. If you arouse the mind too much in your efforts to remedy laxity, it will easily fall into excitation. But if you relax too much, you will likely succumb to laxity. It's a delicate balancing act, and the only way you can meet this challenge is through your own experience, determining for yourself the suitable degree of effort to tune your attention. Buddhist contemplatives have grappled with this dilemma for millennia, and they report it takes great skill to solve it. So that's on stage 5. And then on stage 6, what we're noticing here now is that we're sort of, the rabbit is gone, and which means that now it's much more easy to pick up that subtle dullness, subtle laxity, and be able to deal with it. So again, just to read a little bit from the Attention Revolution on this point, and this is on page 99. And he says the following. In stage 6, involuntary thoughts pass through your consciousness like a river slowly flowing through the valley. So remember, we had that other 4-stage model that's often used when we're using the mind as the object and the thoughts, is that the first stage of practice is like a waterfall of thoughts crashing down on the mind. And the second stage was like a fast-flowing river, and then moving to a slow-moving river and emptying into a still lake. And so actually we have in this chart, if you go over a couple of pages, there's a chart here called the 9 stages leading to Shamatha. And these 9 stages are the ones we're talking about in the diagram. But then there's been an attempt to correlate this 9-stage model with that 4-stage model, and we see that over in the far right-hand column, the involuntary thoughts. So it says here that it's the first 3 stages are more or less the same as the waterfall experience, and that stage 4 and 5 is more like the fast-flowing river, and now by stage 6 and 7, it's more like a slow-moving river. And then 8 and 9, the mind becomes very still. So that's roughly the sort of correlation we have between the 2 models. So here, that's what Alan Wallace is saying here in stage 6. He says, involuntary thoughts pass through your consciousness like a river slowly flowing through a valley. As the mind becomes more at ease, and here he's using when he's going through these 9 stages, he's also using them corresponding to his suggestion that use the first 4 stages for using the breath, stage 5 up to 8, observe the mind, and then 8, 9, resting in awareness. So now he's talking about stage 6, and he's correlating that to the practice of observing the mind. That's why he's talking about this slow-moving river. He says that as the mind becomes more at ease, thoughts flicker like butterflies through the space of awareness, and you are able to passively witness the entire sequence of thoughts arising, playing themselves out, then vanishing. They seem to be less weighty in that they are less able to pull your attention after them. Like Einstein's theory that physical space is warped by bodies of matter within it, it sometimes feels as if the space of awareness is warped by the contents of the mind. At times when we become fixated on something, our minds seem to become very small. Trivial issues loom up in our awareness as if they were very large and important. In reality, they haven't become large, our minds have become small. The experienced magnitude of the contents of the mind is relative to the spaciousness of the mind. So to keep the activities of the mind in perspective, let the space of awareness remain as expansive as possible. In the meantime, the less you grasp onto mental events, the less the space of the mind contracts around them and is warped by them. So let's now look at the remaining stages we haven't looked at so far. So then we go around the corner here now, we have stage 7 and 8 on the next road, and this is called the road of effort or enthusiasm. So at stage 7 and 8 now we have a lot of enthusiasm in the practice. And what we see at stage 7 here is that, of course, the rabbit has gone, we're saying goodbye to the monkey, and there's only a little bit of black left on the back of the elephant. So here at stage 7, what we're noticing is that the batteries are running out, I think.
It doesn't seem to be, but it seems to be cutting in and out. So.
Okay. Just wiggle the cables and hopefully it'll work.
Yeah.
We'll use the technical approach. Wiggle the cables. So stage 7, what we notice here is that about to say goodbye to the monkey, there's hardly any black left on the back of the elephant, which means here at stage 7 now, if we notice a little bit of subtle dullness, subtle agitation, we easily dispel it. And then stage 8, we see now that the monkey has disappeared, so that was any subtle agitation. The black has gone from the elephant, any subtle dullness. So here at stage 8, now all we need to do is put a little bit of effort to start the meditation, and then the meditation is completely effortless. And we see that already the flame, that's on the side of the track on the road, back around stage 5 or 6, we've sort of said goodbye to the flame, meaning the flame was the amount of effort we needed in our mindfulness introspection. So at stage 7, we hardly need any little bit of effort to dispel. And at stage 8, now our meditation is flawless. All we need to do is just a little bit of effort to start the practice, and then it runs effortlessly. So let's briefly have a look at what Alan Wallace says about stage 8. So this is on page 130. By continuing in sustained cultivation of shamatha, eventually you achieve the 8th stage, known as single-pointed attention. You achieve the 8th stage, known as single-pointed attention. You will have achieved it. Yeah, okay. You have now realized a high degree of unification of attention. Wherever you direct it, your awareness is coherent and highly focused. From this point onward, you can flow with the momentum of the practice with little or no effort. You can sustain a high level of samadhi or focused attention, free of the imbalances of even the subtlest laxity and excitation for at least 3 hours or so. Only the slightest degree of effort at the beginning of each session is needed to ward off these obstacles. And you continue in your practice motivated by the power of enthusiasm. So this is the road of enthusiasm here. For the first time, the flow of attention proceeds without any interruption by laxity or excitation. And the overall quality of this state of samadhi is one of stillness. Whereas in the preceding stages, involuntary thoughts arose like a river flowing through the valley, now the mind feels calm like an ocean, unmoved by waves. Sounds pretty good. So that's stage 8. And then we have stage 9 here, which is here is translated as attentional balance. So now, or sometimes translated as equipoise. So in stage 9, now everything is really just spontaneous, and that we can spontaneously and effortlessly move in and out of meditation easily. So again, let's have a look at what Alan Wallace says in his Attention Revolution about stage 9, which is on page 143. With only the slightest exertion of effort, you proceed from the 8th attentional stage to the 9th, known as attentional balance. You are now able to maintain flawless samadhi effortlessly and continuously for at least 4 hours. Due to the power of deep familiarization with this training, you can slip into meditative equipoise, free of even the subtlest traces of laxity and excitation, with no effort at all. This is not to say that your attention is irreversibly balanced. If for some reason you discontinue the practice, you will find that laxity and excitation erode your attentional equipoise. They have not been irreversibly eliminated. But if you maintain a contemplative lifestyle and keep your attention honed through regular practice, this wonderful degree of sanity can be yours for life. So then how do we move from this 9th attentional stage to Shamatha, which is the diagram in the middle at the top? So let's have a look at that. And this diagram in the middle at the top is... Sorry? Shamatha is in the middle at the top here, yeah. And what we see there is the person flying through the sky. So this is symbolizing what's called physical pliancy. So remember when we looked at that chart earlier, the 5 faults and 8 antidotes, the antidotes for laziness were first faith, reflecting on the benefits of the practice. That leads to aspiration to want to do the practice, which leads to enthusiasm or effort, the 3rd antidote, to put effort into the practice. And then the more effort we put in, we achieve this pliancy. And so that's what we're really talking about here now, is that when we achieve shamatha, we achieve this physical and mental pliancy. So physical and mental pliancy is like the body and mind are fit and serviceable and flexible. And with physical pliancy, it's said that your body feels light like cotton. So that's symbolized by the person flying through the sky. And with mental pliancy, flexibility, serviceability, we can now direct our mind to whatever we want without any resistance whatsoever. So that's symbolized by the person riding on the elephant of the mind. They can direct the mind wherever they want it to go without any resistance. So let's have a look at this transition from stage 9 to shamatha. Again,
Can you explain again about the cave?
The cave, well, that is just attentional balance, so everything becomes effortless. And I think that's why we have them sitting down like this. There's no effort needed. The mind is resting, the meditator's resting. It all becomes effortless. So we can slip into meditation effortlessly, remain there flawlessly, clear, no hint of agitation or dullness for long periods of time.
It's not 9 yet.
It's what?
It's not 9 yet. It's in the middle of the way between 8 and 9.
No, that's 9. 9 is the cave.
Ah, 9 is the cave.
Yeah, that's 8 here.